And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is part 1 of our New York special. Thank you for listening. Hello, Cleo.
Hello, Richard.
How are you?
I'm all right, actually. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Actually, this is a bit of a different episode this week because we've just done 100 books. Congratulations.
100 episodes. Yes, thanks. Same to you.
Thank you very much.
Quite a milestone, isn't it?
It is a milestone. It's an 100 milestone.
100 milestone.
So we just are going to take a couple of weeks not reading because we need to work on the podcast and do some other exciting things. And in the meantime, we decided, because we never have time to revisit the old books, we're on such a treadmill doing a new book every week.
It has, actually, because you don't remember most of it now.
Don't remember anything.
No, I don't. I didn't say that.
I don't even remember who we've done. Do you know what? I went through all the old episodes last night. And we've done Elton John, and I actually don't even remember reading it. I don't remember anything about it.
That was early days. Yeah, I know. Rod Stewart was our first one. Oh, my God, it's nearly 2 years ago.
Yeah, amazing.
So, yeah, it's been really nice to revisit. And we picked a theme, New York City, because it's just full of characters and creativity and tales.
And isn't this the amazing thing? Like, we started this thinking, oh, we're going to learn loads about celebrities and stuff. But actually, there's a secondary thing where we've been learning about world history and political stuff. So articulate.
Yeah, I've always known that about autobiographies, though, haven't you? You get someone's life, and by accident, you learn about the time they're in and the place they're in. It just always comes with an autobiography, because there's sometimes a bit of stigma attached to reading autobiographies, like it's not highbrow enough. But actually, the ultimate stories are just people's lives. And you really do learn by being completely entertained at the same time. So never dumb down an autobiography. They're great.
So we are actually highbrow scholars, aren't we, doing this?
We are. We're learned.
One thing that fascinates us as well, after reading a certain number of books, how a lot of people are in the same location.
Yes.
So we actually learn about that place through time and how it evolves. And it's really interesting to read one book of somebody in a certain place at one time as somebody else coexisting. And we quite often say, oh, so-and-so was here at this time.
Yeah.
But the place that keeps cropping up is New York City. So much has happened there.
Yeah, it has.
How many times have you been to New York City?
I've absolutely lost count. That's how many times. Been over all the years.
Yeah, me too, actually. I mean, it's handy being a Londoner that it's obviously JFK is where I fly into every time I come. So you just there by default a lot of the time.
Yeah, you do. If you're going anywhere else, you stop there and you'll be a fool if you don't spend a few days there on the way, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You never tire of that place.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I love just walking around. I don't necessarily have to be going anywhere or doing anything. I just love walking the streets of New York.
Me too.
Like a 1970s hustler.
Yeah, totally.
So this episode is a collection of clips from the previous episodes with people in and around New York City.
Yes.
So shall we just get into
So
it?
shall we start with Blondie? This is the 70s New York, when it was really grimy and exciting, very creative. The New York she describes. This is what I wanted to read. I wanted to get to the bottom of, can someone just describe to me New York in an era, you know? Bob Dylan did a bit of 60s, but it was a very scrappy bit here, a bit there. With this book, I've got an idea of the 60s into 1970s New York, the grimy, crime-ridden, but so alive, and different pockets with Ukrainians here and Italians here, and then the meat district over there, and the bit that was run by all the spice trade, so it smells of spice and coffee really distinctly. And then she says they moved loft apartments all the time, these spacious abandoned warehouses.
All the artists in the New York
Yes.
loft before it all got gentrified.
Yeah, which is where disco was born, in the loft, in all of that. She really describes it, doesn't she? So you can imagine it.
It really made me want to be there. There's a couple of eras in time where I would just really love to just go and live for 6 months. And one of them is like the end of the 1960s in New York. And I felt like through Debbie Harry, I was kind of living vicariously.
Me too. But it's genuinely dangerous.
Yes.
But it's so exciting and creative. Everything's broke. Everyone's broke. But the whole city is broke.
Yeah.
They somehow went bankrupt, and she describes piles of rubbish mounting up, rats everywhere. She describes near misses where she's just gone in and locked the door, and she hears, because the
Somebody
bloke who was
coming in
following her
behind her.
just missed her.
Yeah.
Just some crazy stuff. And then she also really describes finding abandoned stuff on the street all the time. There's a whole pile of dolls they found once and took them and made them into an album cover. Or you repossess things, and that was the essence of punk.
Mm-hmm.
You get something, repossess it, and make it your own. Then the New York was so much more transient then, because so many people coming and going. Now, if you get an apartment, nobody leaves it till they die because you're so lucky to get it. But then there's all this. It's a whole different time, and she really nails it. It's so descriptive. She's obviously reliving it, and she's thinking about it. All the clubs, the characters. She said when she was younger, she felt like she was hiding half of her personality. She also doesn't understand who the rest of her is, and that she's on a big quest to find out.
Right, yeah.
She might want to be a bohemian or an artist. And she's already experimenting making her own clothes as well. Because that's part of the punk movement, which didn't have its name then. But it was just in the air, because obviously we read Vivienne Westwood.
Yes.
I've learned all about punk then. And this was happening at exactly the same time in New York, and they didn't seem connected. It's like, it was just the spirit, maybe it's a post-war spirit of kids who grew up without much or in ration times, who just make do and mend, but make do and invent. Maybe it was just the feeling, because they both seem to go completely parallel, don't they, the punk movement?
Yeah.
Organically. And then they cross over, like the New York Dolls, Malcolm McLaren. But then anyone who came over in that time to New York, they all met Andy Warhol somehow. He seems to be the
well, he was everywhere,
of it all.
He?
Yeah, he never spent an evening in.
Yeah.
She sort of crosses over with him really soon.
So she's a young woman in New York at that exciting time. I mean, she's even going into bars like the Velvet Underground are like playing and stuff.
And Andy Warhol did the set for their show.
And she even gets to see Janis Joplin playing live. Yeah. And I mean, that's an amazing time to be there, as we know.
Yeah.
So then she is seeing the New York Dolls. Yeah. And like you say, she wants to be a New York doll. Even though she's a woman and there's not many women doing stuff on stage.
And they are, of course, fully dressed in drag.
You're right, yeah.
Straight men dressed in women's clothes.
Yeah, and then she bleaches her hair at some point.
Well, she realises that Marilyn Monroe, she idolises Marilyn Monroe. She connects with her, yeah. And it's before she even knew Marilyn was adopted.
Oh, yeah.
Or had a troubled life. She just sensed it, that it was a kindred spirit. I really like that. She could see the vulnerability. On this stunning woman who was also very sexual. And she obviously really identified and started messing with her hair from then on. She does look very Marilyn.
Yeah, she does, actually. So Debbie Harry now has designs to be on the stage herself, but she doesn't quite know how to get it started. Because she says at that moment in time, like the early 70s, there's not really any women on stage doing it. But then she meets this woman called Elder Gentile. Yeah. Made up name.
Well, I'm going to say no because I believe everything.
And Elder Gentile has a band, but Debbie hears that the band has broken up.
Yeah.
So Debbie says, do you want to start another one? Elder, Debbie, and another woman called Roseanne start a group called the Stilettos.
Yeah, it's a good name, that.
Yeah. And they have a male backing band.
Yeah. Did you look them up?
Yeah, there's just barely anything on because it's just pre-video cameras in clubs and stuff.
Which is good, I'm glad.
But there is some music on there, but no video. Yeah.
It was CBGB's at this time, wasn't it?
Yes.
CBGB's was their kind of haven for just new bands to have a go. And it's this amazing environment. It's only supposed to seat 300, well, not a seat, but a fit in.
Yeah.
And I have been there. Yeah. And it is an utter dive, like a fantastically excellent dive. You know, all graffitied and gum, smelly, and little booths all around the side. And it's really long and thin. Stage down one end, tiny. You had to go past the side of the stage to go downstairs to get the toilet. When I was there, it was all graffitied and the door was propped up in the toilet cubicle. You had to lean it up to go it. Or nobody bothered. It's that proper anarchy. It's proper punk.
Quite a few bands started off in CBGBs, didn't they?
Tons of them, and it's legendary now. It's utterly tragic that it closed.
It's not there. It's a menswear shop now.
I went in there the week it closed.
Did you?
Another different time. And I just went in because I'd heard it was closing, but it looked like the door was open, so I went in. It was all being packed up, and they went, no, we've closed. So that would have been within days of Blondie playing the closing gig. Yeah. If not the night before.
Shit.
I know. I was like, God, I was so close to that. I'm amazed they played the closing gig there. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So the Stilettos, they're playing CBGBs and they're opening for television, i.e. the band television.
Yes.
And that carries on for a little while, but then Chris and Debbie leave the Stilettos and the bass player and the drummer come with them. Mm. And then I love this. They start a new band called Angel and the Snake.
It's a great name.
Isn't it brilliant?
Great name.
She's had some really good band names. The Stilettos, Angel and the Snake.
She's good with words.
And Blondie.
Yeah.
And then Angel and the Snake are back at CBGB's opening for the Ramones. But they only lasted 2 gigs, Angel and the Snake. And then, because they then become Blondie and the Banzai Babies. Which quickly got reduced to just Banzai Babies.
Later in the book, when 9/11 happens, and she's living in New York, she's watching it out of her window and watching it on telly, and the full horror of it, her main feeling was, I wish I could go back to the 60s and 70s days. I want New York to be exactly as it was then. And you're just like, wow.
Dodging death.
I mean, yeah. But I do get, though, that those are just the stories, and in amongst that is this amazing scene happening. And so exciting, and your friends, everyone's friends, this wide circle of creative people who were all on the edge. And some of them started making it, like I guess the Ramones and people came up with them.
The Ramones, Patti Smith, television. That's the thing. All of these bands, they're all getting record deals, but Blondie isn't.
Blondie didn't, for ages.
So even though people know Blondie is a live band, nobody wanted to sign them. So they audition for drummers, they get the proper band around them, and that's how they pick up Clem Burke, one of the best drummers in rock and roll, just through an audition. He was the last one to come in that day.
They said 50 people.
Oh, Patti Smith, actually, that was weird. She said Patti Smith turned up and was really aggressive and tried to steal Clem Burke.
Yeah, and that was in their loft, in their house, basically.
She just came in. That's so weird.
Anyway, they got him.
Yeah.
And Blondie is formed.
They played CBGBs every weekend for 7 months straight.
Yeah.
And they never made any money. They paid them in beer.
Oh, it's absolutely unbelievable.
But how tight as a band would they get playing every single...
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. Well, they're doing 2 gigs a night sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Meanwhile, at that exact time, Anthony Bourdain, the super chef, well, he wasn't. He was just a jobbing chef who wrote a brilliant book that we've talked about,
Kitchen Confidential.
He was feeding all these people. He was out there on that scene, and he was saying that he got into all these clubs for free as long as you feed the people on the door. So I was imagining him taking food to them, but I imagine they just came to his restaurant and he just fed them for nothing. Then they let him in.
Maybe it was a bit of both.
Maybe. He was going to CBGB's, he was hanging out with Blondie. Plus, they were all on heroin at that time, weren't they? It was such a drugs culture in New York.
A good New York bonding experience,
yeah.
Heroin and street food.
Yes.
So at this time, this like punk time, lots of other people we've read about kind of are visiting the city, because Vivienne Westwood went, didn't she? Because Malcolm McLaren, was he managing the New York Dolls at this point?
He was, and I think he met them there, did he? I'll tell you what, we'll have to listen to the episode to find out.
Yeah. Like, I don't retain any of this information.
No.
It always surprises me how early punk started, because I think of it as like late 70s, but actually it was blowing up like 74.
Very early.
And actually, let's not forget the New York Dolls.
No, let's not forget them. They were already on the scene.
Yes.
Without any help from Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren.
No, for sure. But then Vivienne and Malcolm went to New York, right? And they took suitcases of their clothes, because they heard that once a year there was this thing where designers would go and take over hotels and open the rooms. And they were in a hotel, can't remember what it was, and nothing was happening. They weren't selling any clothes, and they bumped into the New York Dolls. And
Who had already visited them in London.
That's
in
right,
their shop, so they knew each other.
And they bumped into him, and they said, no, you need to be in the Chelsea Hotel, of course.
Yeah.
And so they moved to the Chelsea Hotel, and
it all took off for them, didn't it?
It took off, and the owner loved them, so they stayed for longer.
Yeah, and they ended up... Yeah. And they ended up in and out of CBGB's and mixing with everybody.
Andy Warhol
cool.
in the factory and stuff. So, it did. But then Malcolm became obsessed with managing the New York Dolls, who were already a thing.
New York Dolls, incidentally, were a kind of punkish music, but they were grown men with long hair who completely dressed as women.
Sorry, I'm just talking about them and not mentioning who they are, because we've just done Morrissey.
Oh yeah, and there's
so
a lot of crossover.
listen to the Morrissey podcast, because the New York Dolls are very important.
Yeah, very linked to.
Yeah. Then here they are again. And I tell you, everybody is linked in
It
these
is amazing,
books.
isn't it?
Yeah. So Vivienne goes back to London because obviously she has children.
Yes.
She's using a lot of babysitting goodwill from her parents. But Malcolm stays over there because he's determined to
He wants to
manage the New York Dolls.
Them, doesn't he?
Yeah, but then he goes back and forth to America a lot. Then he comes back and he wants to do the Sex Pistols, right?
Yeah,
Is that the right order
I
that
think
happens?
so.
And then so the Sex Pistols are created from kids that were hanging out in and visiting the shop.
And then Vivienne Westwood is decking out the New York Dolls in red leather outfits, and
Yeah, wow.
they looked amazing.
She really, it's amazing that you can know her. She's just such a world-conquering icon. But then you delve into her past and you think, oh my gosh, she was dressing the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
It didn't even occur to me that she...
Can I go on a massive tangent?
Yeah.
Because it totally blew my mind that she designed the Virgin Atlantic
Yes.
uniforms, which I must have somehow missed that in the news. And then I've since seen some Virgin Atlantic stewardesses. Amazing. If I hadn't read this book, I wouldn't understand what it means that she designed those uniforms. Because of the way the jackets they actually have some of that bodice effect.
Oh, do they?
The way the jackets fold and the bits around the hips and stuff, you can actually see Vivienne Westwood's style in them. And I would never have clocked that.
I get the impression that she wouldn't have done that for any airline. It's just that she really likes Richard Branson.
That's
They
fair
came up together, and I think eventually he re-signed the Sex Pistols after they were dropped from EMI. But they were a similar age. They came up together at the same time. But she likes what he does.
Yeah,
philanthropically.
That's true. Mind you, the Vatican got Versace to redesign all of their uniforms.
Did they?
I think it was Versace. Yeah. I mean, so sometimes they get random jobs, don't they?
Yeah, but you have to approve of the Catholic Church to dress the Vatican, don't you?
Yes. Anyway, we've just... I've leapt from punk to Virgin Atlantic uniforms. Let's leap back again. Back to the New York Dolls.
The New York Dolls come up quite a lot in other people's autobiographies. Like, I didn't realise how totally influential they were because we never really got them.
You're right.
In the UK, but people who have music careers and stuff.
The New York Dolls seem to be they're more influential than they are famous, if you know what I mean. Yeah, music people know them, so they come up all the time.
Yeah. And I tell you who else started on the New York punk scene, which was a surprise to me because I thought they were hip hop through and through.
Who?
The Beastie Boys were little punks. So the Beastie Boys are in New York City.
Yes, and they are rappers as we know them, but actually they were punk.
Yeah.
So these are the things that have really blown my mind. The fact that they were punk first, the fact they were so young, they were 15 when their first record came out. They were kids. And the third thing is they came from really nice homes.
Yes.
Upper middle, I don't know, artistic parents, all three.
Yeah.
It's amazing how they all came together. A lot of people do when they have similar backgrounds. All of their parents had in common they were really left-wing and really artistic. Shall I actually say who was what? Mike D, Michael Diamond, his parents were art dealers and they lived on Central Park West.
Yeah, they got the money.
Yeah, and he grew up with like really legendary paintings hanging on his walls, like art gallery standard famous painters on their walls. Ad Rock, Adam Horowitz, his dad was a playwright and wrote the first, now they didn't say this in the book, I googled him, he wrote a play that was Al Pacino's first play that he acted in. He went on to be in 8 of his dad's plays.
Wow.
Al Pacino. So really well connected. And then MCA, Adam Yauch, grew up in Brooklyn Heights in a big brownstone and his dad was an architect. His mother was a social worker. So, I mean, wow, they're not gangster rappers.
Yeah.
They didn't come up from the streets.
Yes.
But they then left their houses to grow up on the streets of New York. It's like the next parent was New York City.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of was quite jealous of them reading this because they got to be teenagers in early 1980s New York. I mean, how much fun.
I know. And what all their parents had in common was they all said to them, you are totally free to roam as long as you don't let your schoolwork slide.
Yeah.
You are literally free to go and be whatever you want to be, come home whenever you want, as long as you keep up your schoolwork. And they all did that.
Yeah, so they were good boys from good families who just went out and had a great time in the music scene in New York City. And they were all punks to begin with.
They weren't faking that. They weren't like posh boys.
Oh, I've looked at videos of them on YouTube.
Punks.
They were proper like noise polluted punks.
Yeah, they
the
really
music that I listened to on YouTube was almost unlistenable. They were that punk in the beginning. I mean, I loved it. It's just so much energy.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no mistaking that they were proper little punks. What better place to be a punk than other than 1970s London, where it began. But if you can't get there, be a 15-year-old punk in 1980s New York. Yeah.
I mean, they were born, right, respectively, 1964, 65 and 66. So it was exactly about 1980. Exactly about. So they're kind of a little bit past the birth of punk. So they came in when punk was in full flow.
Yeah, I think it's where we've just read the Blondie book.
Yeah, they just after that.
Just when Blondie hit the mainstream. So then these kids, the Beastie Boys, were hanging out in CBGBs and Max's Kansas City, places we've literally just read about in Debbie Harry's book.
Yeah, we know the world now, don't we? Thanks
and it's
to Debbie
almost
Harry.
like when Debbie Harry left, these kids came in.
Yeah, it's very exciting, isn't it? That's what happened next. Beastie Boys are the... What's the opposite of a prequel?
A sequel.
Yes, thank you. Beastie Boys are the sequel to Debbie Harry.
Yeah, the book is.
Yeah.
We've been lucky recently because we did Bob Dylan as well.
Yeah.
Which was like 1960s
He's
New
the
York.
Prequel to Debbie Harry.
So it's a trilogy.
Yes.
So in a way, people could listen
Bob to Debbie to Beastie Boys.
Bob to Debbie to Beasties.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
That sounded like a rap.
All available on our podcast channels should you want to treat yourself one afternoon.
But it all paints an amazing picture of New York City before it got gentrified. It's changing during this book.
Yes.
By the end of this book, it's turned not as cool as it was.
Yeah.
They're still talking about these piles of rubbish and filth and heroin and coke being cheap. It was quite a broke city. Mm-hmm. And there's still all these lofts in downtown where they could just take over huge spaces and play.
When there was still an accessible arts scene. Yeah.
And music coming out of their ears. There's a hip-hop scene. Disco was still going, even though it supposedly killed. There was gay dance clubs, there's reggae, there's people like Tito Puente, there's CBGBs, rock and punk, jazz, there's Blondie, Warhol was still about, and Basquiat was still painting, graffiti was everywhere. Such a vibrant time, and you're allowed to be a kid and just roam.
I just honestly, just having the opportunity as a 15-year-old to be part of that scene, it blows my mind that you could do that as a 15-year-old.
Oh, also New York, so lawless because America is so cracked down on you can't go to bars before you're 21.
Yeah, right.
They were 15 going to all these gigs, going to bars. They were saying when you got real power is when the DJ gave you drinks tickets.
Yeah, that's right.
So they weren't even drinking at 15 in these bars. You think America's really strict. It wasn't at all in their world.
So they're getting into the punk scene and they quickly form a punk band. So they're not all together in the beginning.
No.
So they start a punk band, which is Mike D, Yauk, but there's a couple of other people, John Berry and Kate Schellenbach, a woman.
Woman drummer.
So they quite soon start gigging and stuff. And then at another gig they go to, there's a punk band called The Young and the Useless. And their singer is Adam Horowitz, Ad Rock. And then eventually, I think John Berry leaves. There's a couple of iterations of the band, but essentially Ad Rock joins. And that's the first iteration of the Beastie Boys, right? But they're still very much a punk band.
They said they all went to see this band called Black Flag play at the Peppermint Lounge.
Henry Rollins, I
looked him up. They're absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
That was where they were all in the room together at the same time. And they said it was a really seminal moment, this gig, because the Beastie Boys potentially formed at that gig because they were so inspired by that band. They were like, we need to be doing this, this punk thing. Let's get together. But also at that same gig, unbeknownst to them, Sonic Youth formed. That'll be in their autobiography.
Yeah, right.
This
That's
Black
mad.
Flag gig. Yeah. It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a chapter about this bloke called Dave who ran the Rat Cage, and he was the DJ there. And he said, these kids came in, they're just like these scruffy kids. They'd go up to the DJ booth and make some requests. Dave would say, yeah, I'll play all these songs for you as long as you stay on the dance floor when I play songs you don't like. And then he said at the end of every night, they climb all the way up to the booth again and say thank you. He said no one ever said thanks. So I love these kids. Yeah. It's really good. He says he booked Killing Joke for New Year's Eve and no one went. I can't remember, there was some other band that were better at some other place, everyone went there, so all of the staff got sacked the next day. So then they all spread out to other places. So this bloke went to Danceteria, which is legendary for giving birth to Madonna, basically. And the Beastie Boys went. They had friends then in these key places that would let them in. There's another bit by a DJ called Anita Sarko, who's also DJing at Danceteria, who loves these boys, who lets them in, and she gives them drink tickets. Just saying how loved they were, these kids. And then they come in saying this place, Danceteria, was the coolest place because it was 10 floors of building.
Oh, it sounded amazing.
And there's like a dodgy basement with stuff going on they didn't really know about.
There's a goth floor.
There's a goth floor because goth was new. Imagine goth being new. Yeah. That's so hard to comprehend. The thing with Madonna is actually, we don't even talk about this in the podcast as such because I don't think it's in her brother's book. But she was so much part of that exciting New York scene at the time. She was actually like dating Basquiat, the artist, and she was absolutely everywhere in the clubs and just totally intermingled in that vibe. She was part of it, the New York scene. She really at the heart of it. She's an important New York person.
She was working it.
Yeah, she really has worked it to the top.
She's just very good. I would say one of her strengths is figuring out what people can do for her and what she can get out of them and how they can help her advance. And the second they've advanced her to where she needs to be, she dumps them and goes on to see who can take her to the next level.
Highly manipulative.
I mean, it's a real skill.
Yeah. It's not a criticism, it's just a fact, because I want Madonna to have gone on to be Madonna so that she can have brightened up our 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
She's still brightening things up, to be honest. She's changed everything. So I don't care how she gets there as long as she gets there. Imagine if you went back to the future and then took Madonna away.
Yeah, it would be boring.
We might live in a grunge world.
We just have Elaine Page and Barbara Dixon. So she's in New York, gigging in bands and stuff, and she's got her brother over, and they're going to the dance clubs like Danceteria. I think there's a dig here that what he likes doing with this book is exploding her myth. Because she says that she just turned up in Times Square on her own with $35 in her pocket. And he's like, well, she had a scholarship to a dance school and there were plenty of contacts she had in the city. But, it's not
and
that much.
And it's a middle-class family and the dad was supported her. And I'm thinking, no, do you know, I don't think he did, because I've watched documentaries where she walks around New York going, I lived here, I squatted there, I did that. I was absolutely starving. I was so thin. You look at pictures, she was stick thin. Yeah. That's a woman who isn't eating. Yeah. Yes, her dad might have given her money, but I don't think she'd have asked for it because she wanted to do it herself.
And he's got 8 kids. He can hardly support all of them.
So I actually
especially not one off of being a dancer in New York City.
She was doing a dolly. She was like, I've got to do this on my own. I'm going to make it. I'm not going to ask for a handout. Yeah. I'm going to make it.
But, there's also this thing that she talks about, that she would make these cassettes and take them to the DJs. And she says that one of the DJs who launched her initially was Mark Kamen's, because she would go into Danceteria, go up to the booth and hassle him until he played the tape. Yeah. And Christopher writes in the book, the DJ who helped her land the record deal, she says she just marched into the club and gave it to him, and hey presto, he played it. That easy? I'm not so sure. Yeah. So is he insinuating that she shagged him?
Oh, if she didn't, I'll eat my hat. Okay. If that's not how she got where she got, then I don't know.
Oh, really? I don't know. I think people could recognise that she's a star in the making. They might want to have sex with her. I don't think it necessarily means they did.
I just think she did. I mean, Nile Rodgers talks about when he's making Like a Virgin with her and he's producing it.
They didn't sleep together, did they?
He didn't want to, and she got so upset.
What?
She was like, why don't you want to sleep with me?
Really?
Like, I don't want to. I just want to work with you. I think
she's
just part
highly
of her
sexual.
Yes, I think she's highly sexual. It's just part of her life. Mm-hmm. I don't think it would have been much of a chore.
She's playing to her strengths.
Yes.
I love when, just to go back to when they were at high school, Christopher says that there was a talent show at the school and the whole family went. So it's Madonna's dad and Joan, the stepmom, and Christopher. They're all waiting for Madonna to come out and do her turn. And Madonna comes out with her friend Carol. They're like in these flesh-coloured leotards and they've painted their bodies. And Christopher says they come out dancing. I couldn't call it dancing. They were just like writhing around the stage.
And they look naked.
Yeah, being so sexual. And said the whole auditorium were just aghast at how sexual it all was. And Dad is mortified, of course. Even at 14 years old, Madonna was being Madonna.
Yeah, absolutely. After I read this, I watched some of the Blonde Ambition tour and I was like, and there's that school performance.
Yeah.
Pushing the boundaries, challenging everybody.
So you kind of have to think that on a world stage, Madonna has constantly pushed those buttons about female sexual autonomy. Yes. So interesting to think, even at the age of 14 in that small town at her high school, she was basically doing the same thing. Wow.
Yeah, it's true because she's brought a masculine energy to the female sexuality, aggressive, powerful, owning it. Yeah. All of that stuff. Nobody did that. Marilyn Monroe, who's one of her idols, she did it in a very quiet way, but while acting completely innocent and weak. There's a power beneath that. Madonna just put that power right on out there.
Plus, the legend of Marilyn, we all think of her as a victim.
Yeah.
Whereas whatever you think of Madonna, you could never call her a victim.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Is her brother a victim?
Everybody, we are all her victims. She's in New York being this exciting young thing and she gets her records played at the nightclubs.
When you say that her records are playing, that is everybody and burning up.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute dance floor corkers. Oh, yeah, I learned about this woman, Maripol. She was the manager of Fiorucci. Christopher worked there for a while. She clothed Madonna. She's the stylist that made Madonna look like Madonna and made all of us kids copy her.
Yeah.
All the bangles. She actually invented the rubber bangle and manufactured them. All those bright coloured rubber bangles. What's so cool about Madonna's image is that it was something you could replicate by just going to a charity or a thrift shop and buying just bits and cutting bits. And so it was that real poor person's make, do and mend fashion of the 80s that anyone could copy. We all went and got bits of leather string and tied them round our wrists. That was a bit hard, but it was Madonna as well. The rubber bands just took off.
It was real punk.
Pop punk.
When you look at Madonna in the early 80s, those first couple of songs, she is essentially singing disco, but she looks like a punk.
Yeah.
And that's not really happened before. I think that's why she stood out, you know.
Yeah.
But it's a very clever image.
Cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And so, yeah, she took off. Then the next song was Lucky Star.
Another thing that I find amazing about young Madonna and her determination is that at that stage in her career, so 1983, 1984, she saw who the biggest pop star in the world was, which is what she wanted to be. The biggest pop star in the world was Michael Jackson. So she finds out who manages him, Freddie DeMann, and she demands a meeting with him and says, I want you to be my manager. And he's so impressed with her that he says, okay, then.
Yeah, so she gets the best manager.
Yeah, she's got the best manager in the business. But she has so much confidence. I admire it so much.
Yeah, she really does.
She deserves everything because she's gone and got it.
Yeah, I know. Outside of this book, because you and I know so much more about her than he's put in this book. Mm-hmm. She went to the building where the music producers were or whatever and just went up and down the lift all day until one of them walked into the lift, so it looked like she was accidentally in the lift and was like, oh, hi. You know, I think she did that for like 3 days or something ridiculous like that. That's how pushy she was, but that's also how intelligent she is. She knew where to go, she targeted, and she did it herself. The more I read this book, it slags off Madonna, the more of a hardcore Madonna fan I'm becoming.
You know, I always thought that one of the biggest missed opportunities of the 1980s is Madonna should have done a duet with Billy Idol. They visually look so similar, and with their blonde hair and their crucifixes.
Yeah, but she doesn't like sharing the limelight.
She really doesn't. And in fact, I don't think she shared the limelight until she recorded with Britney in like 2000.
Britney and Justin,
when she needed younger people to prop her up. But Billy Idol was also around New York at this time, right?
Yes. And he'd come from the London punk scene and he was going to the clubs and finding the disco and seeing that people wanted to dance So he was probably dancing with Madonna before they even knew who each other was.
Yeah, right.
It's possible. They're at the same place at the same time.
Oh, by the way, we haven't mentioned, although it's apparent at this point, Generation X is folded and now Billy Idol's in America being developed as a solo star.
Oh, yeah, on his own.
So he's a solo star now. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. That's fine.
I'll cover it.
Yeah, and so he's working with all of these cool producers. He's making some fantastic punk pop songs.
It all happens at this time. He just heroin this woman and then the manager, but then also they go to Giorgio Moroder to get a new producer, and he's busy. And they recommends his right-hand man, Keith Forsey.
Yeah.
These people stay with them for years, including heroin, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't it amazing to me that he goes to Giorgio Moroder? You're a punk, and you go to Giorgio Moroder, the electronic disco man.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that he was mashing up these ideas of music going together that hadn't really gone together before.
Yeah, I think this is part of why he lasted so long and broke out and became the big star, because he moved with the times.
He also created the times because he created a whole new mashup.
Yeah, I think at the same time, you know, like we said earlier, like Blondie was beginning to do it.
Yeah, she was.
They were punk and they crossed over into disco with like Heart of Glass and stuff. They worked with Giorgio Moroder actually on Call Me, I think. And then when Rapture came out, they started infiltrating the hip hop world. So in a way, Billy Idol's doing the same thing.
Well, now you've made me question whether it was his idea or whether the management that looked after both people suggested it.
Well, it could have happened all at the same time. His music didn't really sound like Blondie music. He's still doing his own thing.
Yes, that's true.
But using the same styles.
Yeah, and the thing that really turned him around, it was all these things, but partly he'd written this song Dancing With Myself that he said was inspired by watching people who were off their head at clubs dancing in the mirrors.
Yeah.
And he loves that song so much he called his autobiography after it, so he's very proud of this song. And then he said he was at this club in New York and he was just sitting there, and when this song came on, everyone rushed off. And he was like, oh my God, they're all dancing wildly. I was right. Because that song had come out and stiffed a little bit, hadn't it? It hadn't got anywhere. And so he was like, no, I was right. They're dancing to it. And so he carried on that track with confidence. And out of that came Moni Moni, the cover, which is killer. Although that wasn't as big a hit as it was when it was re-released as a live version in 1987, which is where I heard it first.
Yes.
But then also Hot in the City, which is so
classic.
Great.
Do you know what's amazing about Hot in the City? When it got serviced to radio, so you know the version we know, in the middle he shouts out New York.
Yeah.
Well, what he did, he recorded 100 different city names.
Oh, he released them in each region.
Each region, because each city has its own radio station. He sent that out with each city's name in it to the appropriate radio station.
So
and that's how they service it to radio. It's an absolute genius.
It's genius.
It's funny because everything we've talked about up to this point is our era. But obviously, New York has been around for a lot longer.
Well, yeah, so before all of that was Bob Dylan. So yes, zooming back in time to the folk scene of Greenwich Village in the 60s. I'm going to say this. He started playing in Café Wa, which is spelt WHA, ? Like, what? And I've been there, because above it is a theatre. It's in Greenwich Village. And the theatre owns the cafe, so I got taken down there and had a brilliant night.
Ah, really?
Without having to pay for anything. Yeah. And I found out that place was owned by Dave Lee Roth's uncle.
Oh, really?
Somebody Roth. Vinnie Roth, something like that, yeah. So Van Halen started in Café Wa.
Did they?
Yeah, no, everyone's played there. Madonna, Brits, everybody you've ever heard of played there. At the time that Bob Dylan's talking, it sounded more like a casual cabaret and some... comedy.
Yeah,
and there's no alcohol
like
down there.
A light entertainment.
Whereas I had a terrible hangover after that.
He says that after he would go on and the musicians would go on, like Woody Allen, Richard Pryor, Joan Rivers, and Lenny Bruce would all come out and do comedy.
Yeah.
But also there were some other variety acts, and he lists them. I think he said somebody used to come out and do facial acrobatics. I mean, what even is that?
That would have to be impressive to even be listed. It's ever so small, though. I mean, it's a really cool place.
So you could see somebody doing their facial acrobatics. I'm going to look into that. It might be
I
worth
bet
bringing
it's
it
amazing.
back. Hey, didn't you say your auntie used to hang out in
Yeah,
Greenwich
in the
Village at this
60s.
time?
She was
So
in
she would have been
Greenwich
part of
Village.
this scene.
She was. She said she was mesmerised by Bob Dylan before he even had a record out.
Wow.
And she used to sit in the square there. And
Washington Square?
Just sit at his feet, cross-legged, and just watch him.
That's like history before it was history.
Yeah, I know. And then she started going out with the record producer who produced his first album. He was called Tony Wilson. He's not mentioned.
Really?
And I googled him. There's a picture of him, very handsome. Bob Dylan making his record.
Your auntie.
And whilst she was going out with him, she was in the studio looking through the glass, watching him record his first album.
Holy crap!
Just like that's just normal, because it was her era, so it's normal. Like if it was.
And he was an icon, Bob Dylan.
He wasn't
at that point.
famous.
He was just some guy
it's just when you
recording
happen to
some
watch someone
music.
come up.
Wow.
Amazing. Isn't it?
Really amazing.
Right place, right time.
So Bob was playing in a few clubs around New York.
Yeah.
And there was one, the name Dave Van Ronk comes up a lot.
Yes.
Who I've never heard of.
No, I've never heard of him. It was one of his heroes that he went to find in New York.
He's a very influential man. And he wanted to play, because he had the Gaslight Club.
Yeah.
And Bob wanted to play in it, but he had no idea how to track this guy down. I think he was in Cafe War one day.
No, he was in the Folk Centre.
Sorry, okay.
Which is so cool. He was hanging out there all the time. Because it's actually a designated place. It was probably tiny, but just for folk music. And Bob Dylan's in there all the time. It also had stories and poetry and all sorts. And then suddenly Dave Van Ronk, his hero, is at the counter and he's like, oh, hi.
He says, how do I get to play at the Gaslight?
Yeah, I think, did he play to him there
Probably.
and then? Yeah, so he was in.
He was in playing at the Gaslight for $60 a week.
Yes, and then he's in with them, like hanging out upstairs, playing poker and drinking and making friends with his heroes. Oh my God, he played harmonica on
Harry
Belafonte's album.
How? What is it with Harry Belafonte?
In
Why is he in
every
everybody's
person's
book?
life.
I never expected to come across Harry Belafonte so often.
No. How could you see that coming? He gushes about him. What a legend he is.
There's about 2 pages in this book just saying how amazing Harry Belafonte is. But then that's what everybody says about him.
That's true.
So Bob now is a proper fixture in the scene, right? He's hanging out with his heroes. He's playing at the Gaslight. And actually, Dave Van Ronk's wife, Terry, who books Dave Van Ronk's gigs all over the country, is beginning to book gigs for Bob. But closer to New York and not far out. So he's getting around.
True.
Oh, and he begins seeing this girl called Suze. It's somebody's sister, I can't remember.
She's the theatre one that gets him to go to all the shows. So suddenly theatre's coming into his life. He's seeing all sorts of stuff. Is that the Kurt Weill thing as well?
Kurt Weill, Bertolt Brecht. She's doing a cabaret. He goes and watches it and he's blown away.
Like, it blows his mind. What's the song that
Pirate Jenny. He's blown away by that because essentially these are like folk stories, and the people who tell the stories in Brecht and Weill are kind of the lower classes. They're the scamps and the scallywags, and the stories are really dark and
they're about ordinary people's lives.
Yeah, so that huge influence on him.
Yeah, like he gets the words, writes them all down, and goes and properly dissects them and how they're constructed. I mean, he does that musically and lyrically, as we've said.
So there's a song, Pirate Jenny. I don't think the song is actually officially called Pirate Jenny. I think it's become known as that now.
Yes.
It's from the Thrupney Opera.
Yeah.
Pirate Jenny. And actually, I went onto YouTube. There's everyone from B. Arthur to Nina Simone doing a rendition of Pirate Jenny. I watched Nina Simone. It's brilliant.
Wow.
And I can see how a young Bob Dylan sat in that theatre and thought, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Hugely influential on him.
All his influences, they're really vast, aren't they?
Yeah.
Jazz is another one.
Yeah. But he thought that the work of Brecht and Weill was actually very similar to folk. He described it as it being folk from a different jug. Really obvious parallels between what he had done up until that point. And just really inspired his storytelling and stuff. Yeah, hugely influential. So the next person to crop up is Carolyn Hester. So she's making an album on Columbia Records. And she wants Bob to come and play some harmonica. There's a guy called John Hammond, who is a talent scout stroke record producer. He's producing Carolyn Hester's album. And so he hangs out in a couple of the sessions. And he's quite taken with Bob. This is how things slot into place. Bob played a gig that week. And the New York Times came to review. And it just so happens that John Hammond had read the New York Times the morning that he went to Caroline Hester's session. And Bob Dylan was in the room playing a harmonica with her.
But you're right, it elevated his status in his mind that day.
Yeah.
Great timing.
And so then after the session, John Hammond said to Bob Dylan, do you want to come and record for Columbia Records?
Yes.
It's like, wow.
Music to your ears, literally.
Yeah. I mean, he did put the work in.
Yes.
But that was a very fortunate set of circumstances.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But you're in the right place at the right time, aren't
that's
you?
what it's
You're
all
playing
about.
the street, you're playing the cafe, you're playing everywhere.
Yeah.
You're buying every lottery ticket until one's the winning ticket.
Yeah, that's it. And John Hammond really had pedigree. You know, he discovered Billie Holiday, Cab Calloway, Benny Goodman, Count Basie, Lionel Hampton.
It's insane.
Who we know from
so
Quincy
he's tied
Jones.
in with Quincy.
And folk music wasn't really on the major labels.
No.
But John Hammond says that he traces a direct line between Bob Dylan doing folk through the early traditions of blues and jazz.
Yes.
So John Hammond discovered all those famous people I've just said and saw a direct line from them to Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
He's a fully musical person.
Yeah. Do you know who else was around at that time? No, not at that time, but it was a big surprise to me to find out that Patrick Swayze was a singer-songwriter playing in those bars in the 70s.
Oh, yes. I totally forgot about
that. Yeah, because it's so...
He was in dance class there.
Actually, yeah, of course. And his image was painted on the proscenium arch around the theatre in the Lincoln Centre.
Oh, yeah.
God, these people, they're just everywhere, aren't they?
I know.
They're like the wind.
They're like the wind. Get up your trousers.
Oh, and actually, we just done Marilyn Monroe. She had the wind up her skirt on 7th Avenue, didn't she?
Yes, she did. Another New York connection.
Okay, so how do we link from Marilyn Monroe to Sinead O'Connor? Let's just do it.
Anyway, the Pope.
The Pope. Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, so we've already mentioned that was her mum's picture and that nobody gave a shit about the children of Ireland, least of all the Pope. And she was about to go on Saturday Night Live and she realised this is the moment. Also leading up to that, she'd been hanging out in this Rasta bar in New York City that she just stumbled upon.
Well, it was opposite the Irish pub.
Opposite the Irish bar where she was initially hanging out just to smoke weed and drink coffee. And then she suddenly realises opposite is an even better place. She said they take her in like a stray kitten. And then she's asking them questions and they can't believe they think she's a boy for ages.
Yeah.
This one day she's really at home there, loves it there. And this one bloke, Terry, says, by the way, I'm going to die. They're going to kill me because I've been running drugs from here. All the kids that are coming in and out with their school bags have actually got drugs and guns. And I'm using them as mules. And I'm treading on someone else's territory. And they're going to kill me. They've already tried. And they did kill him on that Monday. And she was so angry with him and so angry with all of it. That was the thing that pushed her going, now's the time. Went on a Saturday Night Live. She knew what she was doing because she got them to rehearse the song she was singing and then had a picture of something else. And when she did it for real, it was the Pope. And she said, fight the real enemy. She said that was the message to the people who were going to kill Terry. And then she blew out a candle. That's just performance art.
Yeah.
I didn't realise it's that dramatic.
And then she became public enemy number one, didn't she?
And that's when she says, I'm a protest singer, not a pop star.
Yeah.
Although everyone said that's killed your career, she said this is the beginning of my career.
Oh, she said having a worldwide number one derailed her career. When she ripped up that picture, she said, Saturday Night Live is such a raucous show. She said that when she ripped up that picture, there was just a stunned silence. And they went straight to commercial break. Like after Grace Jones hit Russell Harty.
Yes, it's very similar. No one would talk to her backstage. No one talked to Sinead backstage.
Everybody had disappeared. So after that happened, Sinead was completely on her own.
Yeah, it's really exactly the same.
Yeah, so any controversial moment that happens on a live TV show, people disappear. I suppose they're straight into a meeting thinking,
I bet they are.
What the
Damage
heck are we
control
gonna
meetings.
Do? Yeah. So Sinead has not ever regretted that. Like she said, having the millions...
it made her.
Yeah, having the millions selling album derailed her career.
Yeah.
Actually ripping a picture of the Pope got it back.
It did, didn't it? But then straight after that, she's at Madison Square Gardens.
At the Bob Dylan.
Yeah, singing to celebrate Bob Dylan's life. And she had a song all lined up, one of his songs, and he was a father figure to her when she was young, listening to his records. And it was a really whispery song where she was really connecting emotionally. And so when she went on the stage to sing it, she had never heard such a loud sound, even at her own gigs, because half the audience were booing and half were cheering. And then they're both trying to drown each other out.
What's amazing as well, while that's happening, and I would say the boos you can hear them clearer than the cheers, is that she stands there almost like, well, I can't start singing with this level of noise. Then she steps away from the microphone and just looks out at the audience. You think, fucking hell, the balls on that woman.
It's very confrontational, yeah.
Yeah.
It's engaging with her, but it also seems sad. And I was just rooting for her just to start quietly singing.
Yeah.
So I think if she'd have quietly sung, the quieter almost it was, the more it would have drawn people in. But then maybe it wouldn't. But I love what she did anyway. I'd love to have heard her sing that, though. But I love what she did. She just starts really yell singing Bob Marley's song War, and then adds some child abuse words at the end, and then just leaves. Chris Christopherson comes on.
That photo of Chris Christopherson coming on, he puts his hand like on the back of her neck. There's been a lot of feminist discussion about that in the last few years, about, you know, how patronising it is for a man to come out. And Sinead O'Connor even says that she could see him coming across the stage and she was thinking, I don't need a man to come and help me. Thinking about it from Chris Christopherson's point of view and his upbringing, he's a bit of a cowboy. He would have felt very protective of her. And from his point of hearing the crowd make that noise at her, it was quite instinctive for him to go and put his hand on her shoulder and make sure she was all right. I don't think it's a necessarily bad thing. But no, Sinead O'Connor did not need him to do that.
No.
But she did say, if anybody should have done that, it should have been Bob Dylan, because he was stood on the side of the stage and he watched it all happen. She said when she walked off with Chris Christopherson, she looked at Bob Dylan and she says that he's glaring at her like he's my big brother who just told my parents I skipped school. And she just says it was one of the weirdest moments of her life.
But there's so much more comes into play again, because she probably feels let down by her father. You weren't there for me. You weren't protecting me when I needed it. You know, that's her father figure. She very much says it a lot. How much?
But I felt let down by Bob Dylan over this.
Yeah, but he didn't know he was her father.
He was the world's most famous protest singer. Who should have known Sinead O'Connor, what she was doing inside out? He should have backed her up.
Good point.
Bob, you've let us down yet again.
But whereas Chris Christopherson actually said on the microphone, don't let the bastards grind you down, which is actually very supportive.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad somebody came out. I think that's an instinctive
like
thing
solidarity.
to do. Even I'd have done it.
And actually...
A woman, man, doesn't matter. You'd have just to stand by someone who's getting abused on stage.
But also, I imagine the people who are booing Sinead, like the people who are cheering Sinead, we don't have to worry about so much. The people who are booing Sinead are probably Chris Christopherson fans.
Oh my God, yeah, that's true. But you know what? They're there to support Bob Dylan, like you said, a protest singer. And they boo a protest singer.
Yeah.
Come on, people. We should boo that audience.
Yeah.
Rubbish.
And you know what? The funny thing about this is it's not the last bit of trouble she gets into in America.
Oh, of course not. The next thing, someone asks her, do you want to play the anthem, national anthem, before your gig? And she's like, nah, it's a bit naff, really. The only person who makes it cool is Jimi Hendrix, she's thinking. And the next thing they say, she insisted that she doesn't want the national anthem. She hates America.
Oh, they spun it right around.
Well, yeah, they were trying to bring her down.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was record executives, because they actually realised that they need to kill her career so that she can't tell anyone the truth of the record industry.
I love that she put a wig on and she joined one of the anti-Sinead protests.
Amazing. So, yeah, and her mate put wigs on. And they made the news.
Yeah.
They actually got on the news. They interviewed them talking against themselves.
See, she's a funny lady.
Yeah, definitely.
She has a great sense of humour.
Definitely.
And she says that MC Hammer said that she needs to leave America straight away. She says, come to think of it, if there is one she said, actually, come to think of it, there is one reason to leave America. MC Hammer's videos. Christ almighty.
She means that.
You know what? This Bob Dylan thing, the more I hear about him, the more I don't like him. Now, I know that before we did this podcast, because we have always read autobiographies, you and I know that you've read the Cyndi Lauper autobiography, as I have.
I have.
Now, she's another New Yorker, and she actually said once upon a time she was a big Bob Dylan fan, and then she bumped into him backstage, And he said to her, "Oh, you're quite good for a woman." I can't remember exactly.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It was really, really bad. Oh, yeah.
So he's a bit of a wrong'un, really, old Bob.
He is, isn't he?
Yeah, to the women.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to do a Cyndi Lauper.
I'd love to reread it.
Oh, also we need to do Nile Rodgers, because he was entirely around at this time. Studio 54. He was hanging out Billy Idol, Madonna, everybody.
And there's so much going on and people hanging out that we can't fit it all into one episode. So come back soon for part 2 of our New York special. And if you enjoyed any of the clips in the last hour, the full episodes are all available to listen to in our back catalogue of 100 episodes, which you can find wherever you listen to Thrift Shop Biography. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. You could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us, or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.